These days, the two biggest scandals buzzing through the capital are these. First, the fearsome ghost-faced general, decorated with countless battle honors, and said to stop children from crying at night with just a mention of his name, is about to take a wife. Second, his unfortunate bride-to-be is none other than Yun Fu, the capital's most beautiful woman, and the legitimate daughter of Prime Minister Yoon's mansion. When the news broke, it sent shockwaves through the entire city. Who didn't know that Miss Yun Fu and Lord Rongjeon, the young Marquis of the Northern Pacification Marquis's mansion, had grown up together as childhood sweethearts, their betrothal already settled? How did an imperial edict suddenly change the bride, and the mastermind behind all this? None other than Rongjeon, the very young Marquis who once held Yun Fu so carefully in his palms, afraid to drop her, and cherished her so dearly, afraid to let her melt away. He traded his illustrious military achievements for a single imperial decree, bestow Yun Fu's hand in marriage upon the ghost-faced general. Yun Fu was in the middle of painting a scroll when she heard the news. Her brush froze mid-stroke, and a large blot of ink spread across the fine rice paper. She refused to believe it. Lifting her skirt, she cast all etiquette aside and stormed straight to the Northern Pacification Marquis's mansion, determined to get an explanation. But just as she reached the study door, she heard Rongjeon's laughter mingling with his friend's voice inside. "Rongjeon, are you serious? You're really going to marry Yun Fu off to that living hell? Everyone knows the ghost-faced general wears a mask like a demon from the underworld. Rumor has it he drinks human blood and sleeps in graveyards at night. Haven't you always loved Yun Fu more than anything?" Yun Fu's feet rooted to the ground, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of her throat. Then she heard Rongjeon's familiar, yet indifferent voice, tinged with a hint of mockery and coldness. "I do love her, but how dare she try to drive Yi away? This is nothing more than a little push to make her compromise. The moment she backs down and agrees to let Yi stay in my mansion permanently, I'll go straight to the emperor and beg him to revoke the edict." His friend clicked his tongue in disapproval. "Aren't you afraid Yun Fu will be so angry she'll never speak to you again?" Rongjeon let out a low chuckle, his tone full of unshakable confidence. "She won't. We've been together for over a decade. She can't live without me, and I can't live without her. But she has such a spoiled temper, always picking on Yi. This is a good chance to teach her a lesson, so she doesn't bully Yi even more relentlessly once she marries into the mansion. Yi is such a gentle, soft-spoken girl. She just swallows her grievances silently, unlike Yun Fu, spoiled rotten, can't stand the slightest bit of discomfort." Standing outside the door, Yun Fu felt every drop of blood in her body turn to ice, a bone-deep chill seeping into every fiber of her being. So that's how it is. She clung to the cold wooden corridor pillar to steady herself, her vision swimming with black spots. All the little details she'd deliberately ignored came flooding back into her mind, overwhelming her. She and Rongjeon had grown up side by side, innocent and inseparable since childhood, from the days they stumbled around learning to walk, to their teenage years, and finally to her coming-of-age ceremony when he'd blushed and pressed an engagement jade pendant into her hand, vowing, "Afu, I will never marry anyone but you." Everyone in the capital knew that the young Marquis loved the Yun family's young lady more than life itself. For her sake, he'd turned down the advances of every noble maiden, refused to keep any maids in his mansion, and constantly rambled on about our Afu, eager to shower her with all the finest things in the world. But everything had changed half a year ago. Half a year ago, Rongjeon had brought home a delicate, pitiful-looking woman named Liu Yi. He'd said she was the daughter of his wet nurse, who'd taken great care of him when he was a child. Now that his wet nurse had passed away, Liu Yi was all alone in the world, begging for his protection. Although Yun Fu had felt a twinge of unease, she'd dismissed it, thinking he was just a man of honor and loyalty. She'd even gone out of her way to arrange a comfortable place for Liu Yi to stay, but beneath her fragile exterior, Liu Yi had been sowing seeds of discord between her and Rongjeon at every turn. She'd accidentally smashed the jade bracelet Rongjeon had given Yun Fu, inadvertently let slip that Rongjeon had accompanied her on a boat ride to admire the flowers, and even deliberately tripped and fallen, falsely accusing Yun Fu of pushing her. Yun Fu had a straightforward temperament. She'd finally reached her breaking point, tired of watching Liu Yi flit around causing trouble. She'd privately bought an elegant villa outside the city, intending to ask Liu Yi to move there, and had promised to ensure she lived a life of comfort and security for the rest of her days. But Liu Yi had immediately run to Rongzhon, crying her eyes out, claiming that Yun Fu couldn't tolerate her and was trying to drive her out or even kill her. Rongzhon had flown into a rage on the spot, refusing to listen to any of Yun Fu's explanations, and had stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. And then came this sudden imperial edict of marriage. She'd originally been unable to fathom why Rongzhon, who had once loved her so deeply, would be so cruel as to throw her into the rumored living hell of a marriage. Now, she understood, it was all for Liu Yi, to force her to compromise, to avenge his precious Yi, to make sure she never dared to bully Liu Yi again. Tears rolled down her cheeks unbidden, cold as ice, carrying the searing pain of a broken heart. Very well, what a loyal, righteous young marquis he was. Very well, what a helpless, fragile creature Liu Yi was. If that's how it is, Rongzhon, so be it. She would marry that ghost-faced general. She turned around and left silently, as if she had never been there at all. In the days that followed, she never stepped foot out of her courtyard, staying quietly in her little garden, preparing her dowry in silence, ready to marry a man she had never even met, the ghost-faced general, until one day, her maid rushed in to report that the young marquis, Rongzhon, had come to see her. Yun Fu had no desire to meet him and told her maid to send him away, but Rongzhon had disregarded all etiquette and barged straight into her courtyard. He looked just as dashing and spirited as ever, though there was a hint of fluster in his handsome brows. "Afu, why haven't you come to see me for so long?" Yun Fu sat by the window, not even lifting her head, her voice calm and devoid of all emotion. "Didn't you beg the emperor for an edict to marry me to the ghost-faced general?" "I'm preparing for my wedding." Rongzhon's expression changed instantly, and he hurried forward. "Afu, what nonsense are you talking about? You're mine. How could I ever really let you marry someone else? I only wanted to make you back down. My wet nurse was the kindest to me when I was a child. Now that she's gone, Yi has no one else to rely on but me. Why do you have to target her so relentlessly, trying to drive her out of the mansion?" Yun Fu finally lifted her eyes, gazing quietly at the boy she had loved for over a decade, her heart a barren, empty wasteland of calm. "If that's the case, then let her stay in your mansion. She can stay as long as she likes. I have no objections." At her words, joy lit up Rongzhon's face instantly. "You agree? That's all I wanted to hear. I'll go to the emperor right away and beg him to revoke the edict." He turned around, ready to leave, but Yun Fu gently tugged on the sleeve of his robe. "No need," she said. What she meant was, no need to revoke the edict. She would marry the general. But Rongzhon had completely misunderstood. The tension in his shoulders melted away, and a look of triumphant, doting amusement crossed his face. He reached out and playfully flicked her nose. "No wonder you've been so quiet these past few days. You were so scared that you secretly went to beg the emperor to take back the edict, weren't you, silly Afu? I told you it was just a quarrel. I would never really let you marry someone else. It's good that you've finally come around." Watching him stand there, so confident, so convinced that he had everything under control, Yun Fu felt her throat tighten, as if something was stuck there. She remained silent, choosing not to explain a single word, but he was in an excellent mood, taking her hand in his. "Come on, I heard the flower market in the west of the city has some rare new varieties. I'll take you to see them, to make up for upsetting you." Yun Fu couldn't pull her hand free, and was half forced to go out with him. The flower market was the busiest and most prosperous in the capital, teeming with crowds of people, and by some cruel twist of fate, they ran into none other than Liu Yi there. When Liu Yi saw them, she wore a look of perfectly timed surprise and shyness. "Brother Rongzhon, Sister Yun Fu, what a coincidence." Her gaze fell on the mist-flower bouquet Yun Fu had just picked out, and her eyes dimmed instantly. She forced a smile. "I heard Brother Rongzhon liked mist-flowers, so I thought I'd pick some to put in the Marquis's mansion. But now I see it's because Sister Yun Fu likes them that Brother Rongzhon does. Your bond is truly as touching as everyone in the capital says it is." I've been such a bother these past few months. Once you two are married, I'll leave. Rongzhon cut her off sharply. His tone full of pity. Don't talk nonsense. Afu has already agreed to let you stay permanently. The Marquis's mansion will always be your home, you don't have to leave. But Liu Yi only hung her head and began to sob, as if she had suffered an unspeakable injustice. Rongzhon rushed to comfort her with soft, gentle words. Watching the scene unfold before her eyes, Yun Fu found it utterly unbearable to look at. She turned around, ready to leave, but the sky suddenly opened up. Pouring down with a torrential rain, the three of them had no choice but to take shelter in a nearby restaurant. Inside the restaurant, Rongzhon was still as attentive to Yun Fu as ever. Afraid she'd caught cold from the rain, he took off his outer robe, intending to drape it over her shoulders. But he didn't forget about Liu Yi either, telling a servant to bring her a clean cloth to dry herself off. Watching the care that had once been reserved solely for her now split in half. Yun Fu felt a bitter sense of irony wash over her. Rongzhon ordered the waiter to bring several bowls of hot ginger soup to ward off the cold. Soon enough, the waiter arrived, carrying a tray of steaming hot ginger soup. But perhaps the floor was slippery from the rain, his foot slipped, and the tray in his hands flew out of his grasp, hurtling straight toward the small charcoal brazier burning between Yun Fu and Liu Yi. In the blink of an eye, Rongzhon's face paled with terror. Acting purely on instinct, he lunged forward, straight for Liu Yi. He pulled her tightly into his arms, using his own back to shield her from the flying sparks and scalding hot ginger soup. Meanwhile, Yun Fu, who was closer to him than Liu Yi, was hit head-on by the toppling charcoal brazier. Yun Fu screamed in agony. Her arm and the hem of her skirt were instantly seared with horrific red blisters, the skin swelling up in painful welts. Hearing her cry of pain, Rongzhon finally snapped back to his senses. He quickly let go of Liu Yi and turned to Yun Fu, his face filled with panic. Afu, are you okay? I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I only saved the person closest to me. Yun Fu's face was deathly pale with pain, cold sweat dripping down her forehead. But her heart hurt far more than her burns. The person closest to him, it had been her. He had been standing right between her and Liu Yi. All he had to do was reach out his hand. And he could have pulled her to safety. But instead, he had chosen to lunge for Liu Yi, who was farther away, staring at her ashen face and the gruesome burns on her skin. Rongzhon finally panicked. Let's go, I'll take you to the doctor right now. He swept her up in his arms and rushed downstairs. With Liu Yi following closely behind, her face etched with concern. When they reached the nearest medical clinic, the doctor was just about to treat Yun Fu's wounds when Liu Yi, who had been standing quietly to the side, suddenly swayed and collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Rongzhon let out a shout of alarm, immediately setting Yun Fu down and rushing to catch Liu Yi in his arms. Doctor, quick, come and see what's wrong with her. The doctor's apprentice looked embarrassed. Sir, we only have one doctor in the clinic right now, I'm afraid. What should we do? Rongzhon did not hesitate for a single moment. Treat her first, she has a weak constitution. Afu, you'll have to endure it a little longer. I need the doctor to check on Yi first. With that, he pulled the doctor straight over to take Liu Yi's pulse, his face filled with frantic worry, as if he had completely forgotten about Yun Fu, who stood just a few steps away, her skin blistering and peeling from the burns. Writhing in agony, watching his retreating figure, Yun Fu's heart felt like it was being torn to shreds. Once upon a time, even if she'd pricked her finger with a sewing needle, he would have fussed over her for ages, holding her hand and blowing on the tiny wound, desperate to take her pain away. But now, the young apprentice at the clinic couldn't bear to watch any longer. He leaned over and whispered to her, "Miss, your wounds are severe. If we don't treat them soon, they'll fester and leave permanent scars. Perhaps you should go to another clinic instead." Yun Fu lifted her head with great effort, her gaze falling on Rongzhon, who was still completely focused on Liu Yi, not even sparing her a single glance over his shoulder. The last flicker of faint hope in her heart was extinguished. Once and for all, she nodded weakly, summoning all her strength to unclasp the engagement jade pendant he had personally placed around her neck. She handed it to the apprentice, her voice hoarse and broken. "Please, Give this to him later. With that, she gritted her teeth against the searing pain and stumbled out of the clinic, disappearing into the curtain of rain outside. Every step she took sent waves of agony shooting through her as her wounds rubbed against her clothes, nearly causing her to faint from the pain. When she finally made it back to the Prime Minister's mansion, the family doctor gasped in horror at the sight of her injuries. "Miss, how did you get hurt this badly? You should have gotten treatment immediately. If we delay any longer, the wounds will become infected and you'll develop a fever." Yunfu closed her eyes, letting the tears mix with the rainwater streaming down her face. She had tried to get treatment, but he had chosen not to let her. She fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, Rongzhon burst into her room in a hurry. He clutched the jade pendant tightly in his hand, his face twisted with confusion and panic. "Afu, why did you return the pendant to me?" Without waiting for her to answer, he rushed to explain himself. "I was wrong yesterday. I saw Yi faint and panicked. She's always been so frail. I was terrified something would happen to her. I didn't mean to ignore you. How are your wounds? Are you still in pain?" Yunfu just stared at him silently. Listening to his feeble excuses, he had rambled on, but he hadn't spared a single thought for how much pain she must have been in, left without a doctor to tend to her wounds in time, or how likely it was that she would be left with permanent scars. Seeing that she was silent, Rongzhon assumed she had forgiven him, as she always did. He let out a sigh of relief and pressed the jade pendant back into her hand, his tone taking on an unyielding, domineering edge. "This is our engagement token. You must never take it off again, let alone return it to me. Keep it on, do you understand?" She was about to speak when the door opened again. Liu Yi appeared at the doorway, carrying a box of pastries, her figure as delicate and graceful as a willow branch in the wind. "Sister Yunfu, I came to apologize." Her eyes were red-rimmed with tears. "I hope you won't be angry with Brother Rongzhon because of what happened yesterday. These pastries are my own handiwork, a small token of my apology. Please, will you try one?" Yunfu didn't even glance at the pastries. "I don't need them." Liu Yi's eyes instantly filled with tears. "I know you must think my humble cooking isn't good enough, but I spent hours making these with all my heart. At least try one, please." Yunfu's voice remained cold and distant. "I said I don't need them." Watching Liu Yi's pitiful, tearful expression, Rongzhon's heart ached with sympathy. "Afu, Yi is only trying to be kind. Fine, if you won't eat them, I will." He opened the pastry box, picked up a piece, and brought it to his lips, but paused halfway. Yunfu saw it clearly. The pastry was filled with red beans. Rongzhon was allergic to red beans. Eating even a single bite would break him out in a terrible rash all over his body, but after only a moment's hesitation, he met Liu Yi's expectant gaze and ate the pastry anyway, even smiling in praise. "Delicious." A sharp, stabbing pain shot through Yunfu's heart, spreading like 1,000 tiny needles. She remembered the palace banquet last year. The Empress had given her a plate of extremely sweet pastries from the imperial kitchen. She had never liked sweet food, but she couldn't bear to refuse the Empress's kindness. Just as she was feeling awkward, Rongzhon had stepped forward with a smile and said to the Empress, "Auntie, I'm just feeling hungry. May I have this plate of pastries instead?" Then, in front of everyone, he had eaten every last bite of the cloyingly sweet pastries on her behalf. At that moment, she had thought he was the most understanding, most protective man in the world. Now, he had found someone else he was willing to do anything for, even things he hated. After finishing the pastry, Rongzhon left with Liu Yi, pausing only to say to Yunfu, "Afu, rest well. I'll come pick you up tomorrow, and we'll go out to enjoy the spring scenery." The next day, Rongzhon arrived as promised, with Liu Yi still trailing closely beside him. Yunfu pretended not to notice. When they reached the countryside, Rongzhon seemed determined to make up for his mistake the day before, doting on her more attentively than ever. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, and Yunfu shivered involuntarily. Rongzhon noticed immediately, his voice soft with concern. "Are you cold? I'll go to the carriage and get your cloak." He turned and walked toward the carriage. Meanwhile, Liu Yi was flying a kite nearby. For some reason, The kite string suddenly tangled itself around the hem of Yun Fu's skirt. Liu Yi let out a startled cry and hurried over to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Sister Yun Fu, I didn't mean to, let me help you untangle it." She rushed forward, flustered, but instead of untying the string, she deliberately pulled hard, tearing a huge gash in the fabric of Yun Fu's skirt. Yun Fu's fair calves and skin were exposed to the eyes of everyone around them. A crowd of young lords and ladies gathered around, pointing and whispering, their gazes filled with shock and amusement. Yun Fu was overcome with shock, anger, and humiliation. "Liu Yi, get away from me." But Liu Yi feigned concern, trying to cover her up while secretly tugging at the skirt even harder. "Don't panic, sister, I'll fix it right away." Yun Fu's anger boiled over. She swung her hand and pushed Liu Yi away forcefully. "I said get away from me." Her strength was greater than she realized. Liu Yi let out a shrill scream and stumbled backward, falling with a splash into the pond nearby. Rongzhon had just returned with the cloak. When he saw what had happened, his face turned ashen with rage. Without a second thought, he jumped into the pond. In his haste, he even knocked Yun Fu aside, who was standing right by the pond's edge. Yun Fu stumbled and fell hard to the ground, her palms scraping against the sharp stones. Blood streaming down her hands, the pain was so intense that her vision blurred. As more and more people gathered around, she couldn't bear to stay there, half-dressed and humiliated. She gritted her teeth against the pain and scrambled to her feet, rushing back to the carriage to change into a spare set of clothes. She had just finished changing when the carriage curtain was thrown open violently. Rongzhon stood outside, holding the soaking wet, shivering Liu Yi in his arms. His face was dark and terrifying, his voice like thunder as he shouted at her. "Afu, why did you push Yi into the pond? You know how weak she is. The water is freezing, were you trying to kill her?" Yun Fu stared at Liu Yi in his arms, who looked fragile and helpless on the surface, but whose eyes glinted with a hint of triumph, and her heart was wrenched with unspeakable pain. "You only saw me push her into the water. Did you not see what she did to me first?" Rongzhon's brows furrowed deeply, his tone dripping with distrust. "What could she possibly do to you? She's just a weak woman. You've always been spoiled and arrogant, picking on her at every turn. I've seen it with my own eyes. And now I'm right here, and you still refuse to stop. Apologize to Yi at once." Watching him defend Liu Yi so fiercely, Yun Fu felt a bone-deep coldness spread through her body. "Apologize? Never." She pushed past him, desperate to escape this suffocating place. Rongzhon reached out to grab her, but suddenly, chaos erupted. A group of masked bandits charged out of the forest, hacking at anyone in their path and looting everything in sight. The scene descended into utter pandemonium in an instant. Help! Someone help us!" Rongzhon's face paled with alarm. He quickly pushed Yun Fu and Liu Yi into the carriage. "Hide inside, don't come out." Then he drew his sword and charged into the fray. Yun Fu and Liu Yi huddled together inside the carriage, listening to the clashing of swords and the screams of terror outside. But Liu Yi, apparently terrified out of her wits, suddenly threw open the carriage curtain and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Brother Rongzhon, help me, please help me." Her cry immediately drew the bandits' attention. When several bandits spotted the two beautiful young women inside the carriage, their eyes lit up with lecherous greed. They grinned maliciously and charged toward them. "Pretty ladies, come out and play with us." Liu Yi screamed hysterically in fear. Rongzhon was trapped in a fight with several bandits, unable to break free. When he saw what was happening, his eyes were filled with rage and despair. One bandit reached out to grab Liu Yi, another lunged for Yun Fu. In that split second of life and death, Rongzhon finally managed to shake off his attackers, but he could only save one of them. His gaze darted frantically between the terrified Liu Yi and the pale, trembling Yun Fu, his eyes filled with agonizing indecision. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made his choice, swinging his sword to slash at the bandit who was grabbing Liu Yi, and Yun Fu was roughly seized by the other bandit, thrown onto a horse, and galloped away into the dense forest. The horse jolted violently beneath her, but Yun Fu's heart hurt far more than her body ever could. In the last moment before she was taken away, she had seen clearly the hesitation in Rongzhon's eyes and his final choice. He had chosen Liu Yi again. Yun Fu was dragged roughly back to the bandits' mountain stronghold and thrown onto the cold, hard ground. The bandit leader stared at her stunning face, still beautiful even in her disheveled state, and his eyes glinted with lust. What a fine-looking beauty, perfect to be my wife and mistress of this mountain. Yun Fu forced down her fear and the pain racking her body, gritting her teeth and snarling, "Never, I would rather die than submit to you." The bandit leader's face darkened with anger. "You refuse to drink the wine of goodwill, so you'll have to drink the wine of punishment. Beat her until she agrees. But be careful not to mar that pretty face of hers." The whips came down like a rain of blows. Lashing against Yun Fu's already battered and bruised body, she bit her lip until it bled, refusing to make a single sound as the blood soaked through her clothes. By the time they stopped, she was barely conscious, her vision fading, but she still refused to surrender. The bandit leader lost his patience. He pulled out his knife with a sinister grin. "If you won't submit, then you're useless to me," just as the blade was about to strike. Panicked shouts and the clash of swords suddenly erupted from outside. "Boss, we're under attack. It's the Imperial soldiers, led by the young Marquis Rong." The bandit leader's face turned ashen with fear. Moments later, the sounds of fighting and screaming drew closer and closer. The dungeon door was kicked open with a deafening crash. Backlit by the sunlight, a tall, anxious figure charged inside. It was Rong Zhon. When he saw Yun Fu lying on the ground, covered in blood and barely recognizable, his pupils constricted violently, and his eyes instantly blazed with towering rage and heart-wrenching pain. "Afu!" He rushed over and lifted her gently in his arms, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I'm late. How are you? Don't be afraid, I'm here now." Yun Fu forced her eyes open with great effort. When she saw it was him, her lips moved, but not a single sound escaped her throat, only silent tears streamed down her cheeks. Rong Zhon wrapped her tightly in his cloak, lifted her bridal style, and his voice dropped to an icy, murderous snarl. "Not one of these vermin will be left alive. Tear them all to pieces." He held Yun Fu in his arms and galloped back to the capital at breakneck speed. Along the way, many passers-by caught glimpses of the blood seeping through the cloak and Yun Fu's deathly pale profile. They pointed and whispered among themselves. Rong Zhon roared at them, his voice like thunder, "Dare to look again, and I'll gouge out your eyes." He carried Yun Fu back to the Prime Minister's mansion, laid her gently on the bed, and took her hand in his, repeating his explanations and apologies over and over again. "Afu, it was a life-or-death situation. I had to save Yi first. She was closest to the bandits. I never thought you'd be taken away alone. As soon as I found Yi, I immediately mobilized my troops to rescue you. Don't scare me like this. Please say something." Yun Fu kept her eyes closed, her heart as cold and lifeless as ash. She remembered how, once upon a time, even if she'd accidentally cut her finger, he would have panicked, personally applied medicine to her wound, and comforted her for ages. But now, she was covered in injuries, having barely escaped death, and all he could do was offer excuses after the fact. She didn't want to say a single word. Watching her silently shed tears, Rong Zhon's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. He pulled her trembling into his arms and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here. Don't say anything if you don't want to. Just sleep well, I'll never leave your side." Perhaps it was the overwhelming exhaustion and pain, but Yun Fu actually cried herself to sleep in his arms when she woke up again. The sky outside the window had darkened, and only her personal maid was standing guard by her bed. "Miss, you're awake." The maid hurried forward. "Where is he?" Yun Fu's voice was hoarse beyond recognition. The maid's eyes flickered with hesitation. Then she whispered, "The young Marquis stayed by your side for a while." Later, a maid from Miss Liu's courtyard came rushing over, saying Miss Liu had been terrified out of her wits, suffering from palpitations and crying uncontrollably. So the young Marquis, he went to her. A fresh wave of stabbing pain pierced Yun Fu's heart, spreading like 1,000 tiny needles. Just then, another maid burst into the room in a panic. "Miss, it's terrible. Now the entire capital is talking, saying that you were captured by bandits and lost your virtue." Yun Fu closed her eyes tiredly, feeling too drained even to be angry. "Investigate," she said, her voice faint but cold as ice. "Find out where these rumors originated, soon." The maid returned to report, her face ashen with anger. "Miss, we found out the source. It came from Miss Liu's courtyard. Her personal maid went to the taverns and spread the rumors herself." Yun Fu took a deep breath, her heart turning to solid iron. "Report it to the authorities," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "Charge her with defamation and slander, for damaging my reputation. Let the officials arrest her." She was truly exhausted. After giving the order, she drifted off to sleep once more. The next day, just as she had regained a little strength, Rong Zhon burst into her room in a furious rage. "Afu, why did you report E to the authorities? Do you have any idea what the imperial prison is like? She's so frail, how could she possibly survive it?" Watching him storm in to demand answers, Yun Fu felt a bone-deep chill settle in her heart. "Because she spread malicious rumors and destroyed my reputation, that's impossible." Rong Zhon retorted without a moment's hesitation. "E is such a kind-hearted girl. After you were taken away, she cried her eyes out every day, and even went to the temple to pray for your safe return. How could she ever do something like this? Afu, I know you resent me for saving her last time. If you want to take your anger out on someone, take it out on me. Don't make things difficult for a helpless young woman." "Helpless young woman," Yun Fu almost laughed out loud. "The authorities will judge fairly. If she is innocent, she will be released unharmed. She won't last that long. The imperial prison is cold and damp, she'll fall gravely ill." Rong Zhon's voice was urgent with panic. He stepped forward and dragged her roughly out of bed. "You're coming with me to the Court of Judicial Review right now. You will tell them it was a false accusation. Withdraw the charges at once." Yun Fu stared at him in disbelief. "Rong Zhon, have you lost your mind?" "I'm not crazy. I can't let E suffer." Rong Zhon's eyes were dark and menacing. When he saw her struggling and refusing to comply, he suddenly pulled something out of his sleeve. It was an ancient jade hairpin, the only remaining memento of Yun Fu's late mother. Years ago, when Rong Zhon had given her the engagement jade pendant, she had presented him with this most cherished heirloom in return, as a token of her deepest affection. Now, it had become a tool for him to threaten her. "If you refuse to go," Rong Zhon's voice was cold and devoid of any warmth, "you will never see this hairpin again." Yun Fu stared at the jade hairpin, her heart aching so badly she could barely breathe, and tears poured forth in a flood. She looked at the young man before her, once so familiar, now a complete stranger, and felt a pain so intense it was almost unbearable. "Very well, I'll go," she said, her voice shattered into 1,000 pieces, "but you must return the hairpin to me first. I never should have given it to you in the first place." Rong Zhon seemed taken aback by how readily she agreed. He hesitated for a moment, then handed the hairpin back to her, a flicker of unease stirring inexplicably in his heart, but he quickly brushed it aside, reassuring himself that she only wanted the hairpin back because she was angry at his threat, nothing more. When they arrived at the Court of Judicial Review, the Chief Justice informed them that the evidence against Liu Yi was conclusive, and she had already been found guilty in the preliminary hearing. If she were to be acquitted, the accuser, Yun Fu, would have to admit to filing a false charge, which carried a punishment of 50 heavy strokes of the cane, 50 strokes, enough to break a person's body and cost them half their life. Yun Fu turned to look at Rong Zhon, her voice eerily calm. "Even if it comes to this, you still want to set her free." Rong Zhon stared at her pale, fragile face, and a flicker of guilt crossed his eyes. But in the end, he softened his voice and pleaded with her. "Afu, just admit it was a mistake, I promise you. Afterward, I will summon the best imperial physicians to treat your wounds. I will make it up to you 100 times over." Yun Fu's heart turned to ice. She tore her gaze away from him and clutched her mother's jade hairpin tightly in her hand. "Very well, I confess." She walked step by step to the center of the courtroom, each step feeling like she was treading on the sharpest of knife blades. The cane came down hard and fast, each blow sending waves of excruciating, searing pain coursing through her body. She bit her lip until it bled, the metallic taste filling her mouth, but she refused to make a single sound of pain. When the 50 strokes were finally over, She was covered in blood, barely clinging to consciousness as she collapsed to the ground. Through her blurred vision, she watched as Rong Zhon rushed eagerly forward to help Liu Yi, who had just been released, weeping softly and looking utterly helpless. As he passed by her, his footsteps hesitated for a moment. He looked down at her horrifically injured form, and his eyes filled with unmistakable pain and remorse. "Brother Rong Zhon, I'm in so much pain." Liu Yi nestled into his arms, whimpering softly. Rong Zhon immediately tore his gaze away from Yun Fu. No longer sparing her a second glance, he lifted Liu Yi in his arms and hurried away. Watching their retreating figures, walking side by side, Yun Fu suddenly let out a low, bitter laugh. She laughed until tears streamed down her face, and finally, she fainted from the overwhelming agony. When she woke up again, she was back in her own bedroom. Rong Zhon was sitting by her side, his face etched with deep guilt. Precious medicinal herbs and silken fabrics flowed into her room like water. As he tried to make amends, he stayed by her side almost every waking moment, doing his best to care for her. But Yun Fu just stared numbly at the canopy above her bed, refusing to utter a single word to him. Rong Zhon, sensing his own guilt, grew even more gentle and attentive with her. Seeing him come and go from her bedroom every day, Yun Fu finally found her voice, her tone cold and distant. "Rong Zhon, we are not yet married. For you to come and go from my boudoir so freely is a breach of etiquette, and it does nothing to help my already damaged reputation." Rong Zhon was stunned, as if he'd just heard the most absurd thing in the world. "Afu, since when have you cared about these trivial formalities? We've been inseparable since childhood. I even used to climb over your garden wall in the middle of the night to bring you freshly roasted pine nuts. Besides, we are betrothed by imperial decree. Who dares to gossip about us?" Betrothed? A wave of bitter sadness washed over Yun Fu's heart. Had he already forgotten? That very imperial decree that bound her to him was the same one he had begged for, the one that had originally been meant to marry her off to another man. She fell silent once more. Just then, a maid from Liu Yi's courtyard came rushing in, flustered. "Young Marquis, it's an emergency. Miss Liu accidentally twisted her ankle. She's in terrible pain and has been crying your name non-stop." Rong Zhon's brows furrowed with concern. He immediately stood up and turned to Yun Fu. "Afu, I have to go check on Yi. Rest well." With that, he left without a second glance, hurrying away in a rush. A few days later, it was Yun Fu's birthday banquet. She had not invited Liu Yi, but Rong Zhon brought her along anyway. "Afu, Yi knew you didn't invite her, and she's been feeling terribly anxious. She's been so worried about your injuries, she insisted on coming to see you. It's your birthday today. More people will make it more lively. Don't be angry." "All right," Rong Zhon coaxed her softly, but his words were filled with nothing but protectiveness toward Liu Yi. Yun Fu felt her heart turn to ice. When had he ever considered her feelings? The young man who had once loved her with every fiber of his being was gone forever. The banquet had barely begun when Liu Yi started causing trouble. First, she complained in a petulant tone that she couldn't stomach the rich food at the Prime Minister's mansion, calling it too greasy. Then, she had the audacity to order the servants to fish out the rare, decades-old koi carp from the mansion's pond and have them roasted over an open fire. She even had the nerve to call it a change of taste. The Prime Minister's face turned ashen with anger, but for Rong Zhon's sake, he forced himself to remain calm. Next, she accidentally dropped a guest's expensive birthday gift, splashing Yun Fu with water from the shattered vase. Yun Fu told herself over and over again, it was her birthday banquet. She must not lose her temper. Besides, Rong Zhon was constantly defending Liu Yi, so she had no choice but to swallow her anger, again and again. Soon, it was time for the gift-giving ceremony. Rong Zhon presented her with a box of priceless Eastern pearls, glowing with brilliant luster. Then it was Liu Yi's turn. She held a cage covered with a cloth, and stepped forward timidly. "Sister Yun Fu, this is my birthday gift for you." She lifted the cloth, revealing a huge beehive inside. The buzzing of bees could be heard clearly from within. Yun Fu's face paled with horror, and she stumbled backward in shock. "Take it away, quickly." But Liu Yi pretended to be frightened. Her hand trembled, and instead of pulling the cage back, she held it out toward Yun Fu. Don't be afraid, sister. The bees are all inside the hive. They're very gentle, they won't sting you. Take it away, now, Yun Fu shouted sharply. As they tussled over the cage, Liu Yi let out a startled cry. Pretending she had lost her grip, she deliberately smashed the entire beehive to the ground. Crash! The hive shattered into pieces, and thousands upon thousands of bees swarmed out instantly, attacking everyone present in a frenzy. Ah, bees, run for your lives. The banquet descended into utter chaos in an instant. Guests screamed and scattered in all directions. Tables and chairs toppled over, and plates and cups lay shattered and strewn across the floor. Yun Fu was the closest to the hive. Her arms and neck were stung repeatedly in the blink of an eye, the pain burning and numbing all at once, in the midst of the pandemonium. She watched as Rongzhon shielded Liu Yi behind him without a second thought, grabbing a torch to swat at the bees. His entire attention was fixed on the terrified woman. He didn't spare a single glance for Yun Fu, who was also being swarmed by bees and writhing in agony. After what felt like an eternity, the bees were finally driven away, but the guests, scared out of their wits, all made hasty excuses to leave, casting looks of resentment and fear at Yun Fu as they departed. Her carefully planned birthday banquet was completely ruined. The spotless reputation she had built up in the capital over the years was shattered along with it. Yun Fu could no longer contain her rage. She charged straight at Liu Yi and slapped her hard across the face. Liu Yi, did you do this on purpose? Liu Yi clutched her stinging cheek, sobbing her heart out, tears streaming down her face. Sister, I really didn't mean it. I had no idea this would happen. Rongzhon immediately stepped in front of Liu Yi to shield her, frowning at Yun Fu. Afu, Yi was only trying to be kind. Kind? Yun Fu cut him off sharply, pointing at her swollen, throbbing stings, her voice cracking with despair. Rongzhon, you keep saying you love me, but when those bees swarmed us, did you even spare a single glance at my wounds? Did you feel even the slightest bit of worry for me? Your eyes only ever see her, only her. Rongzhon stared at her bloodshot eyes and the painful welts covering her skin. His expression finally shifted, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. He was about to speak to comfort her, but Liu Yi suddenly let out a heart-wrenching wail. It's all my fault. I ruined sister's birthday banquet. I'll make it up to her right now. With that, she suddenly lunged toward the nearby pillar, intent on slamming her head into it. Rongzhon's face turned ashen with horror. He lunged forward and caught the fainting Liu Yi in his arms, then glared at Yun Fu with icy rage. Yun Fu, are you satisfied now? Look what you've done to her. Why do you have to drive her to her death? He didn't spare another glance at Yun Fu's deathly pale face. He lifted Liu Yi bridal style and hurried out of the Prime Minister's mansion without a backward look. Watching their retreating figures, Yun Fu felt a bone-deep coldness seep into her bones. Her heart aching so fiercely it was almost numb. In the days that followed, Rongzhon didn't come to see her every day as he usually did. Yun Fu didn't care. She began to quietly prepare her dowry, ready to marry the ghost-faced general she had never even met. A few days later, a flower-viewing banquet was held in the palace, and Yun Fu had no choice but to attend. At the banquet, she saw Rongzhon and Liu Yi, whom he doted on meticulously, never leaving her side for a moment, but she only cast them a cold, fleeting glance, her eyes passing over them as if they were complete strangers. Watching her cold, distant demeanor, Rongzhon felt a sharp pang of unease in his chest. After the banquet, he took the initiative to stop Yun Fu. Afu, he softened his tone, reaching out to take her hand. You've been angry for 3 days now, isn't that enough? I'm not mad at you anymore. Stop being stubborn with me, okay? Yun Fu dodged his hand, remaining silent, just like he used to do. Rongzhon pulled out an exquisite small box and handed it to her. Look what I brought you. It's the South China Sea coral beads you love so much, I specially. He never got to finish his sentence. A guard came rushing over in a panic. Young Marquis, it's an emergency. Miss Liu. Miss Liu accidentally knocked over the glazed lamp offered to the Empress. The shards startled Her Majesty's carriage. The Empress is furious. She's ordering Miss Liu to be arrested and interrogated for her crime. Rongzhon's face paled with shock. He immediately grabbed Yun Fu's hand and dragged her toward the imperial garden. There, Liu Yi was kneeling on the ground, trembling like a leaf. When she saw Yun Fu approaching, she seemed to see a lifeline. She pointed at Yun Fu and screamed, tears streaming down her face, "Your Majesty, please see the truth." It was Sister Yun Fu. "She bumped into me just now, that's why I couldn't hold onto the glazed lamp. It's not my fault." Yun Fu was utterly stunned by her shamelessness. The Empress fixed her with a sharp, piercing gaze. "Yun Fu, did this happen?" Yun Fu remained calm. "Your Majesty, I have been talking with the young Marquis this entire time. I never went near Miss Liu, let alone bumped into her. The young Marquis can vouch for me." All eyes turned to Rongzhon. Liu Yi looked at him with tearful, pleading eyes. Rongzhon stared at Yun Fu's calm yet distant face, then at Liu Yi, who looked like she was about to faint from fright. His lips twitched. Finally, under the Empress's imposing gaze, he lowered his eyes and whispered, "Your Majesty, it was indeed Yun Fu who accidentally bumped into Yi." Yun Fu's head snapped up, staring at him in utter disbelief. She had never imagined that to protect Liu Yi, he would tell such a blatant, absurd lie even if it meant throwing her under the bus to take the blame. Upon hearing this, the Empress flew into a towering rage. "How dare you, Yun Fu? You not only dared to startle my carriage, but you also tried to frame an innocent person. Guards, seize her and punish her severely." Yun Fu was roughly forced to her knees on a board studded with sharp nails. The spikes pierced her knees instantly, and she let out a scream of agony. Rongzhon couldn't bear to watch. He took a step forward instinctively, wanting to beg for mercy on her behalf, but Liu Yi clung tightly to his sleeve, weeping. "Marquis, please don't tell the truth. Do you want me to die? I'm so weak. If I'm punished, I'll surely perish." Rongzhon's footsteps froze mid-step. He looked at Yun Fu's agonized expression, his eyes filled with conflict and pain. In the end, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand his ground. Then came an even crueler punishment. Having her back scraped with an iron comb, the cold, sharp teeth of the comb tore through her skin, sending waves of searing, unbearable pain coursing through her body. Blood instantly soaked her back. Yun Fu could no longer bear the agony. She fainted completely. In the days that followed, Rongzhon stayed by Yun Fu's bedside again, racked with guilt, taking meticulous care of her. But Yun Fu was already numb. No matter what he said or did, she didn't react at all. Halfway through her recovery, an urgent military crisis erupted at the border, forcing Rongzhon to leave. To his surprise, Liu Yi volunteered to stay behind to take care of Yun Fu. "Afu, let Yi take care of you," Rongzhon urged. "She feels terrible about what happened. Letting her care for you will ease her guilt." Yun Fu found it utterly ironic, but her injuries were too severe to argue. At first, Liu Yi waited on her with exaggerated caution. Yun Fu remained vigilant, never letting her get too close. Then one day, when Yun Fu's personal maid had gone to brew medicine, Liu Yi brought a basin of water into the room. "Sister, let me wipe your face and comb your hair for you," Liu Yi said, smiling sweetly. Yun Fu wanted to tell her to leave, but she didn't have the strength. Liu Yi picked up a comb and began to slowly brush Yun Fu's long hair. Suddenly, she spoke. "Sister, there's a hairstyle that's popular in my hometown. It makes people look really energetic. Why don't I trim yours a little?" Before Yun Fu could even respond, she picked up a pair of scissors and, snip, cut off a huge lock of Yun Fu's hair. "What are you doing?" Yun Fu was shocked and enraged. As the saying goes, body, hair, skin, all are gifts from one's parents. Cutting a woman's hair was a great taboo in the imperial court, especially for a woman who was about to be married. She tried to push Liu Yi away, but her body was too weak to resist. A vicious glint flashed in Liu Yi's eyes. Instead of stopping, she continued to hack away at Yun Fu's hair with the scissors, cutting it haphazardly. Snip, snip. In the blink of an eye, Yun Fu's once cascading, silky black hair was cut into ragged, uneven tufts, looking as if it had been chewed up by a dog. "Stop." Yun Fu's personal maid rushed back from brewing medicine and screamed at the sight. "Liu Yi, what have you done to the miss?" Yun Fu summoned her last ounce of strength, pointing at Liu Yi, her voice hoarse with rage. "Drag her out, and beat her to death." Liu Yi immediately dropped the scissors, falling to the ground and throwing a hysterical tantrum, wailing and screaming, "I didn't mean it, I just wanted to give sister a new hairstyle. Why does sister want to kill me?" Rongzhen, who had rushed back upon hearing the commotion, saw the chaos in the room and Yun Fu's ruined hair. His expression changed, but he still instinctively rushed to defend Liu Yi. "Afu, Yi was only trying to take care of you. How could you threaten to kill her over something so trivial?" Yun Fu pointed at her hair, now a tangled mess like weeds, trembling with fury. "Look at this, look at my hair, this is her idea of kindness." Liu Yi sobbed pitifully. "Brother Rongzhen, I really didn't mean it, the scissors were so slippery. I only wanted to trim it a little, trim it a little." Yun Fu almost laughed out of anger. Rongzhen looked at Liu Yi's tearful, pitiful face, then at Yun Fu's livid expression. In the end, he still chose to believe Liu Yi, softening his voice to comfort her. "Afu, Yi didn't mean to do it. Hair, it will grow back eventually. Don't make such a big deal out of it." Looking at the man before her, so utterly incapable of telling right from wrong, so blatantly biased, Yun Fu's last flicker of hope was shattered completely. She snapped, grabbing the medicine bowl beside her, she hurled it violently at them. Get out of here right now." Rongzhen pulled the weeping Liu Yi out of the way, about to say something, but Yun Fu slammed the door shut in his face. Cutting them off completely, she leaned back against the door, slowly sliding down to the floor, hugging her mangled hair. She burst into heart-wrenching sobs, pouring out all her grievances and despair. No matter how frantically Rongzhen pounded on the door outside, she never opened it again. In the days that followed, Yun Fu never stepped out of her room once. All the gifts Rongzhen sent were returned, untouched. Then, one day, Rongzhen came to see her again only to be turned away at the door once more. Helpless, he called out to her through the door, "Afu, please open the door." "Okay, tomorrow. I'm taking Yi to Jingshan Nunnery outside the city for a few days. She's been saying she's been feeling restless lately. I want to take her there to calm her mind. You stay home and rest well. When I come back, I'll bring you the plain, delicious Osmanthus cakes from the nunnery." "Okay." Inside the room, there was no response. Rongzhen sighed heavily, finally turning to leave. 3 days later, it was the day of Yun Fu's wedding. She put on her bright red wedding dress and covered her face with the red veil. Her mother hugged her, tears streaming down her face. Her father looked at her with a complicated expression, hesitating to speak. Yun Fu, however, was surprisingly calm. She hugged her mother gently in return. "Father, Mother, take care of yourselves. Would you like me to help you craft a dramatic and cliff-hanging English ending for this chapter?" To amp up the anticipation for Yun Fu's wedding to the Ghostface General, she did not cry or make a fuss, nor did she show the slightest trace of reluctance. The wedding sedan swayed unsteadily, carrying her toward the mansion of the Ghostface General, the man rumored to be unspeakably terrifying. The General's mansion seemed to have no more than a handful of guests. The atmosphere was solemn, even a little desolate. The wedding rituals proceeded quickly. She was supported by attendants, moving mechanically as she bowed to heaven and earth. There were no elders present to receive her obeisance. When it came time for the bride and groom to bow to each other, through the red veil and its tassels, she could only make out the tall, upright silhouette of the man across from her and the cold, black iron mask covering most of his face. The mask's ferocious, fanged design sent the few guests into a stunned silence. Yun Fu's heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but something else entirely. All the rumors that had once scared children into silence flooded her mind. He drank human blood, slept in graveyards at night, and looked like a demon from hell. Yet strangely enough, she found she felt no fear at all. Perhaps it was because her heart had already died, or perhaps it was because, just now, when they had bowed to each other, he had gently supported her elbow. His grip was steady and restrained, and through the thick layers of her wedding gown, the warmth of his fingertips had seeped into her skin, a faint, unmistakable warmth that felt oddly reassuring. For a man rumored to be cruel and violent, his hands were surprisingly warm. On the other side of the city, Rongzhen had stayed with Liu Yi at Jingshan Nunnery for 2 days, listening to scriptures and eating vegetarian meals, But an inexplicable unease lingered in his heart. Liu Yi clung to him as usual, whispering about how frightened she was, for the first time, though. Rongzhon found his mind wandering elsewhere. On their way back to the capital, they passed through a bustling market. He spotted a vendor selling grasshoppers woven from straw, lifelike little things. He remembered how, when they were children, Yunfu had loved chasing these insects. She would catch them but never dare to hold them, always begging him to weave straw ones for her to play with instead. Almost as if possessed, he reined in his horse and bought one. It was crudely made. Nowhere near as skillful as the ones he had woven for her when they were young. Liu Yi caught sight of it and reached out, her eyes filled with expectation. "Brother Rongzhon, it's so cute. Can I have it, please?" Rongzhon stared at the straw grasshopper, then instinctively pulled his hand back, his tone flat. "This is the kind of thing Afu likes. If I gave it to you, she'd be upset again when she found out." Liu Yi's hand froze in midair, her face paling slightly. Tears instantly welled up in her eyes, and she said in a wronged voice, "Brother Rongzhon, now you won't even spare me a silly straw bug." Looking at her tearful face, an inexplicable irritation stirred in Rongzhon's chest. For the first time, he did not rush to comfort her. Instead, he said, "I'm going to be married soon. I won't be able to stay by your side every minute of the day like before. You need to learn to be more understanding." With that, he ignored her and urged his horse into a faster gallop. Watching his resolute retreating figure, Liu Yi dug her fingernails deep into her palm, her eyes darkening with malice. Rongzhon rode straight to the Prime Minister's mansion, the straw grasshopper still clutched in his hand. He thought, when Afu sees this, she might glare at him like she used to, then reluctantly take it, the corners of her mouth curving up in a secret smile. But the moment he reached the mansion's gate, his eyes were stabbed by the sight of red silk decorations hanging everywhere. A heavy dread settled in Rongzhon's heart, a fierce sense of unease gripping him tightly. He grabbed a familiar gatekeeper by the collar, his voice sharp with urgency. "What's going on here? Why is the mansion draped in red?" The gatekeeper was terrified by his furious expression, stammering, "Why, young Marquis, you don't know. Today is the young lady's wedding day." Rongzhon felt as if he had been struck by lightning, his face turned deathly pale, his fingers loosening. The straw grasshopper fell to the dusty ground. "I'm her fiancé. How could Afu marry someone else? Who did she marry? Tell me." Who else but the ghost-faced general, the man you personally begged the emperor to betroth her to? The gatekeeper was almost paralyzed with fear. The wedding sedan left ages ago. By now, they've probably already finished the ceremony. After the wedding rituals were completed, Yunfu was led to the bridal chamber. She sat quietly on the edge of the wedding bed, waiting for the husband she had never met. She did not know how long she waited before the door creaked open, and steady footsteps approached slowly. A faint, crisp scent of pine drifted toward her, mixed with a hint of blood. He stopped in front of her, then she heard his voice, deep, slightly hoarse. "Are you afraid?" Yunfu was stunned. She shook her head instinctively, then remembered he could not see her, and whispered, "No." "Oh." A faint note of amusement colored his tone. "The whole city says I'm bloodthirsty, hideously ugly, and that I drink human blood. You marry a man like me, and you're not afraid?" Yunfu clenched the fabric of her sleeves tightly. Perhaps it was the eerie calm of the moment that gave her courage, or perhaps it was simply that she had nothing left to lose. Her mind went blank, and the words tumbled out of her mouth before she could stop them. "Then, when you eat people, could you drug me first to knock me out?" I'm rather afraid of pain." The air fell silent instantly. Yunfu wanted to bite off her own tongue. What nonsense was she spouting? Just as she was drowning in regret, she heard a low, quiet chuckle from above her head. "I cannot," he replied solemnly, his slightly hoarse voice seeming to draw closer, carrying an indescribable sense of pressure and a hint of playful teasing. "If I knock you out, how will you feel the pleasure of being devoured on our wedding night?" Yunfu froze for a moment, then her mind finally caught up to the double meaning of his word devour. Her cheeks burst into flames, the blush spreading all the way down her neck. Luckily, the red veil hid her embarrassment. This man, how could he say such things? he seemed able to picture her flustered state. For he said nothing more. Instead, he slowly reached out a hand, his long fingers well-defined, calloused from years of battle, and grasped the corner of her red veil. Yun Fu's heart jumped into her throat, just as the veil was about to be lifted, reporting, "General." A guard burst into the room in a panic. Dropping to one knee, "It's an emergency. Marquis Rongzhon of the Northern Pacification Marquis's mansion has led a large contingent of his personal soldiers to storm the mansion. Armed with weapons, he's shouting that he's here to take the bride back by force." The guard's panicked shout shattered the delicate, intimate atmosphere of the bridal chamber. Red candles burned brightly, casting a festive glow over the room, but they also illuminated the distorted face of Rongzhon, who had barged in, his features twisted with anxiety, anger, and panic. His soldiers faced off against the general's stern guards in the courtyard. The cold glint of drawn swords replaced the joyous noise that should have filled the air. Beneath her veil, Yun Fu's fingers trembled violently. The faint softening in Yi Chen's demeanor, brought on by her silly remark about being afraid of pain, vanished in an instant, replaced by an icy, murderous coldness. The temperature in the bridal chamber seemed to drop several degrees in an instant. He did not even glance at the guard. His gaze, hidden behind the mask, seemed to penetrate the red veil and rest directly on Yun Fu's face. "Are you afraid?" he asked again, his voice deeper than before, carrying a cold, metallic edge. Yun Fu took a deep breath, forcing down the surge of fear in her heart, and shook her head. After everything that had happened, what more was there to be afraid of? She had already endured the worst possible pain, the death of her heart. Yi Chen let out a soft, non-committal hum, his emotion impossible to read. He turned around. The hem of his black wedding robe sweeping through the air in a sharp, cold arc. "Keep the lady safe," he ordered, then strode out of the room without another word. The door slammed shut behind him, blocking out the chaos outside and temporarily blocking out the man she had once loved with all her heart and hated with equal passion. Yun Fu sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the faint clashing of swords, shouts, and the voice she knew so well it was etched into her soul, a voice now filled with uncontrollable rage and obsession, drifting in from outside. "Yi Chen, hand Afu over to me. She is mine. What right do you have to marry her? Get out of my way, or I swear I'll raze this general's mansion to the ground." Her heart felt as if it were being squeezed by a cold hand, yet simultaneously scorched by fire. Rongzhon, he had come after all, in the most reckless, unyielding way possible. But what right did he have? He was the one who had thrown her into the fire pit, and now he was the one trying to take her back. Did he see her as nothing more than a toy, something he could give away at will, then snatch back whenever he pleased? Torches blazed brightly, illuminating the chaos in the courtyard. Rongzhon's personal soldiers clashed with Yi Chen's black-armored guards, and several men already lay fallen on the ground. Rongzhon stood in the center of the fray. Dressed in a crimson silk robe, his once handsome brows were now twisted into a ferocious scowl, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a trapped beast, driven completely mad. His sword was stained with blood, its tip pointing straight ahead. Yi Chen stepped slowly out of the mansion, his black iron mask glinted with a cold, eerie light in the fire's glow, the fanged design seeming to come alive. He wore nothing but his wedding robe, no armor to protect him, and yet he exuded the overwhelming pressure of a 1,000-man army. Young Marquis Rong. His voice was not loud, yet it cut through all the noise like a blade of ice, sending a chill down everyone's spine. "You storm my mansion armed with weapons and disrupt my wedding ceremony. Are you plotting treason?" "Treason?" Rongzhon let out a bitter laugh, his sword trembling slightly in his hand. His tone was arrogant, yet filled with agony. "Yi Chen, you stole my fiancée. How dare you turn around and accuse me? Give Afu back to me, or I won't hesitate to paint this place red with blood today." "Fiancé?" Yi Chen's tone was flat, yet every word was like a sharp knife. "The Emperor's edict bound her to me. All 6 wedding rituals were completed properly. The entire world knows that Yun Fu is my lawfully wedded wife. Rongzhon, are you questioning the Emperor's will, or are you just a sore loser?" Rongzhon was left speechless, his face turning livid with rage as his chest heaved violently. That was just a fit of anger. I didn't mean it. Afu loves me. We've loved each other for over a decade. How could she possibly want to marry someone like you? Someone like this?" His words trailed off, his gaze sweeping over the ghostly mask with undisguised contempt and jealousy. This hideous monster. The coldness surrounding Yi Chen intensified, but he did not lose his temper. Instead, he let out a low laugh. As if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world, a laugh filled with endless mockery. "A monster, He, Rongzhon, you are the one who hurt her the deepest, you are the one who handed her over to another man, and now, you are the one who comes to humiliate her husband on her wedding day, with a track record like that. Do you even have the right to speak of love?" "I did not," Rongzhon snarled, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "I only wanted to force her to compromise. I never thought things would go this far. Afu understands. She's just angry with me. She would never really abandon me. Let her come out here. I demand to ask her myself. Ask her." Yi Chen's tone dropped sharply, icy cold. "My wife is not someone you can summon whenever you please. I will settle the score with you later for the disturbance you've caused. Now, take your men and get out." "I'm not leaving." Rongzhon had completely lost his sanity. He raised his sword, ready to charge forward. "I won't leave without seeing Afu." "Yi Chen, you dare not lay a finger on her." Yi Chen's eyes turned sharp, his hand tightening on the hilt of his sword, when suddenly, a clear, trembling voice cut through the tension. "Enough." Everyone turned toward the sound. There stood Yun Fu, having lifted her own red veil at some point, standing on the veranda of the main hall, clad in her vibrant red wedding gown. Her face was as pale as snow, her black hair cascading like a cloud down her back. Her lips were painted the brightest shade of crimson. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, yet her aura was cold enough to chill the heart. She descended the steps slowly, her gaze fixed directly on Rongzhon, as if she did not see the glinting swords behind him, nor the madness and desperation in his eyes. "Rongzhon," her voice was not loud, but it reached the ears of every single person present. "Have you not made enough of a scene?" When Rongzhon saw her, his eyes blazed with sudden, wild hope. He dropped his sword instantly and lunged forward. "Afu, come back with me. It was all a misunderstanding. I'll fix everything. I'll beg the emperor to rescind the edict. We've loved each other for over a decade. Surely you haven't really abandoned me." Yun Fu looked at him, her eyes a desolate wasteland, devoid of any emotion. "The emperor's edict has been issued, and all wedding rituals are complete. I am now the general's wife. Young Marquis Rong, please leave." It felt as if a thunderbolt had struck Rongzhon's mind, leaving it blank and ringing with a deafening roar. He stared at her, at those cold, unfeeling eyes, and for the first time, he felt like he was looking at a stranger. This was not his Afu. His Afu would never look at him like this. Never say such words. "No, that was never my true intention," Rongzhon pleaded, reaching out to grab her hand. "I only wanted to make you accept Yi. I never thought you'd actually marry him. Afu, I know I was wrong. Come back with me. I'll beg the emperor to take back his order right now." Yun Fu watched his outstretched hand, a flicker of disgust crossing her face. She stepped back sharply, avoiding his touch. Then, from her sleeve, she pulled out the warm, polished jade pendant, the engagement token she had cherished close to her heart for years. A glimmer of hope sparked in Rongzhon's eyes, only to be shattered as Yun Fu lifted the pendant high above her head, and without a second glance, smashed it violently against the ground. Crack! The crisp sound of breaking jade echoed sharply through the silent courtyard. The exquisite white mutton fat jade shattered into pieces, scattering across the cold stone floor. "Our bond," Yun Fu's voice was cold and resolute, without a trace of a tremor, "is like this jade. It is broken forever. Please leave at once, and do not disturb my wedding any further." The sound of the jade shattering seemed to break the last thread of Rongzhon's sanity. His eyes bulged with rage, and he let out a roar of agony, charging blindly toward Yun Fu. No, but he never even got close to her. Yi Chen moved like a phantom, appearing in front of Yun Fu in the blink of an eye. He did not even draw his sword, he merely raised his hand casually, clamping down on Rongzhon's wrist with a grip like iron. The force was so immense that Rongzhon froze instantly, a searing pain shooting up his wrist, cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. young Marquis. Yi Chen's voice was colder than ever, his killing intent undisguised. My patience is not infinite, take one more step, and I will not hesitate to forget that we serve the same emperor. Rong Zhon struggled, but it was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree. Useless. He stared at Yun Fu, completely shielded behind Yi Chen's tall figure. She did not even glance at the shattered jade on the ground, nor did she look at him. Overwhelming despair and agony crashed over him like a tidal wave. In the end, under the cold gaze of the masked general, he was escorted out of the mansion by Yi Chen's black-armored guards, his back hunched, his figure utterly dejected, filled with nothing but unwillingness and pain. The heavy gates of the general's mansion slammed shut with a thud, cutting off all the noise and chaos from the outside world. Only then did Yi Chen release his grip. He turned to look at Yun Fu. Her face was still pale, but her eyes remained calm. He lowered his gaze, noticing her fingers, which were trembling slightly. Were you frightened? His tone had softened considerably from before. Yun Fu shook her head. Do not be afraid, he said, looking straight into her eyes, his voice deep and unshakable. From now on, within these walls, no one will ever dare to bully you again. He held out his hand to her. Palm upward, a gesture of invitation. Yun Fu stared at his hand, its knuckles prominent, its skin rough with calluses from years of wielding weapons. Then she lifted her eyes to his, hidden behind the cold iron mask. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, enveloping her cold, slender fingers firmly, exuding a reassuring sense of strength. He led her by the hand, stepping back into the glow of the red candlelight. Inside the bridal chamber, the red candles still burned brightly, casting long shadows of the two of them on the wall. The air was filled with a quiet, fragile stillness, the calm after a storm mixed with an indescribable tension. Yi Chen did not let go of her hand immediately. His palm was warm and dry, the rough calluses on his fingers brushing gently against her skin. Through the layers of fabric, that warmth seeped into her, inexplicably chasing away some of the coldness in her heart. He said nothing, simply leading her to the table. He picked up the wine jug, filling 2 white jade nuptial cups with clear wine. The liquid shimmered, reflecting the dancing candle flames. He handed one of the cups to her. Yun Fu took it silently. Her fingers trembled slightly when they brushed against his. He raised his own cup, his gaze falling on her face through the ferocious mask, his voice deep and resonant. The wedding wine. Yun Fu lowered her eyes, lifting her cup as he had, their arms crossed, drawing them closer together. She could smell the faint, crisp scent of pine on him, mixed with a clean, fresh note of soap, nothing like the metallic tang of blood she had imagined a battlefield general would carry. The wine burned as it slid down her throat, leaving a hint of sweetness in its wake. She drank a little too quickly, coughing softly as she covered her mouth. His hand moved almost instinctively, his rough thumb brushing gently across her lips to wipe away a stray drop of wine. The gesture was a little stiff, even clumsy, like that of a man unused to such tenderness, but the touch was surprisingly warm, searing her skin. Both of them froze for a moment. He pulled his hand back quickly, his expression returning to its usual calm, his voice flat. Slow down. There was no discernible emotion in his tone, yet it lacked the icy, murderous edge it had carried earlier. Yun Fu's cheeks flushed slightly. She whispered, "Thank you." Silence fell between them once more, but it was no longer the tense, unfamiliar silence of before. Having weathered the storm together, in this small, candlelit bridal chamber, a subtle, fragile connection seemed to be forming between them, silent and unspoken. He turned, taking a long sandalwood box from a nearby curio shelf, and placed it in front of her. "Open it," he said. Yun Fu hesitated for a moment, then lifted the lid. Nestled on a bed of red velvet lay a hairpin made entirely of translucent, glowing blood jade. The jade was warm to the touch, its carving exquisitely detailed, a rare and priceless treasure, a wedding gift. He said simply, "It was prepared in haste, not as precious as your mother's heirloom, but wear it for now." Yun Fu was stunned. How did he know about her mother's jade hairpin? The red candles crackled, casting their warm glow over this unusual pair of newlyweds. Yun Fu looked into his eyes, hidden behind the cold iron mask. For the first time, in those deep, unfathomable pools of darkness, she saw a faint glimmer of something that felt like peace. Yi Chen raised his hand, moving slowly as he unfastened the ferocious ghost mask. The candlelight flickered, revealing not the fanged, demonic face of the rumors, but an extremely handsome one. His sword-like eyebrows slanted sharply toward his temples, his eyes as deep and bright as cold stars, his nose was straight and high-bridged, his lips thin and well-defined. A faint scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheek, but instead of marring his features, it only added to his untamed, wild charm. A testament to the battles he had fought, his gaze was fixed intently on her face now, filled with a quiet scrutiny and a hint of nervousness, barely perceptible. The nervousness of a new husband. Yun Fu was truly taken aback for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. She lowered her eyelashes, avoiding his piercing gaze, and whispered, "General, you are nothing like the rumors say. The rumors claim I have a green face and fangs, that I drink human blood." A faint, almost imperceptible note of teasing colored his tone as he set the mask aside casually. "Can you rest easy now?" Yun Fu did not know how to answer, so she remained silent. The wedding wine was brought forth again. His hand was steady as he poured the wine, his knuckles firm and strong. As their arms crossed to drink, he drew close to her. Yun Fu could smell the faint, crisp pine scent on him, mixed with that clean, soapy freshness. Her mind was in turmoil, and she drank too quickly. Coughing softly as she covered her mouth, his hand moved almost instantly, his rough thumb brushing gently across her lips. The gesture was a little stiff, even clumsy, like that of a man unused to such softness, but the touch was surprisingly warm and searing. Both of them froze for a moment. He pulled his hand back quickly, his expression returning to normal, his voice flat. "Drink slowly." The atmosphere hung in a delicate, charged silence. The night grew late. He waved a hand, extinguishing most of the candles, leaving only one burning in the distance, casting a hazy, ambiguous glow over the room. His approach carried a powerful sense of pressure and dominance, mixed with the scent of wine and a unique, masculine aroma. When his lips descended on hers, the kiss was at first a little awkward and unsure, but it quickly deepened, becoming hungry and possessive, as if he was trying to confirm her existence this way, to leave his mark on her skin. Her wedding gown was cumbersome and intricate, but he undid it with infinite patience, yet even through the layers of luxurious fabric, the warmth of his fingertips burned her skin. She tensed up completely, her fingers cold as ice. When the first wave of pain hit, tears sprang to her eyes instantly. She pushed against his chest instinctively, her body trembling. He froze abruptly, halting all his movements. His breath was ragged as he pressed his forehead against hers, his voice hoarse and strained. "Does it hurt?" Instead of forcing her to continue, he lowered his head, kissing the tears from the corners of her eyes clumsily. His large hand patted her bare back gently, awkwardly, as if comforting a frightened little animal. "Relax," he whispered, his voice still gruff and lacking in tenderness, but it carried an unspoken promise of restraint. "Would you like me to help you polish the emotional nuances of this English version to make the tender, tentative connection between Yun Fu and Yi Chen feel even more vivid?" Once her ragged breathing had softened and her body had relaxed from its rigid tension, he resumed, his movements slowing significantly, tentative, careful, and restrained. Yet the searing heat and raw power beneath still sent tremors rippling through her, leaving her feeling helpless and disoriented. The red silk curtains swayed gently, blending the sounds of gasps and soft whimpers into the air. He held her tightly throughout, his arms locked around her like iron bands, as if he meant to crush her delicate frame and merge her completely into his very bones and blood. When it was over, Yun Fu was exhausted, drifting off to sleep almost instantly. In her dazed state, she felt herself being lifted gently, a warm cloth wiped tenderly and carefully over her sore body, his touch now utterly different from the earlier urgent possession. Afterward, she was drawn into a warm, solid embrace. The steady, powerful beat of his heart echoed in her ears. In this unfamiliar hold, listening to this unfamiliar heartbeat, she felt an inexplicable sense of peace she had never known before. Sinking into a deep, restful sleep, she woke again, disturbed by a faint, tickling sensation. The sky was just beginning to lighten with dawn. She found Yi Chen lying on his side, propping his head up with one hand, twirling a strand of her hair around his fingertips. His eyes were deep as he gazed at her sleeping face. Who knew how long he had been watching her? When her eyes fluttered open, he said nothing, leaning over her without hesitation. "General, dawn is breaking," she whispered. Pushing weakly against him, her voice hoarse, her body aching all over as if it were not her own. He murmured non-committally, his lips already brushing the sensitive skin of her neck, his large hand sliding expertly under her sleeping robe to caress her smooth flesh. "I have no duties today, I will stay with you." His desire was insatiable, endless, as if he could never get enough of her. The morning light streamed through the window lattice, casting dappled shadows over his handsome, sharp features. A flush of passion colored his cheeks, beads of sweat rolling down his strong jawline. His eyes were fixed on her, filled with undisguised possession and an almost obsessive adoration. Yun Fu had no strength left to resist. Swept away once more in the surging tide of passion, it was not until the sun was high in the sky that she finally managed to get up, her legs so weak she could barely stand. At lunch, he was already fully dressed, sitting beside her, personally serving her soup and dishes, most of them nourishing tonics, and placing them before her. He even scooped up a spoonful of porridge, blew on it to cool it down, and held it to her lips with natural ease. The serving maids all hung their heads, holding their breath, not daring to glance at them. In the afternoon, she tried to rest, but no sooner had she lain down than he followed her into the room, the curtains falling shut behind him. "Yi Chen," she whimpered, truly frightened now, her voice trembling with tears, the faint flush of last night and this morning still lingering at the corners of her eyes. "I really can't take any more. Please spare me." He kissed her tears away, his voice deep and hoarse, utterly enchanting. Just one last time, yet this last time dragged on so long she nearly fainted again. Afterward, he carried her to the bath, washing her himself. In the warm water, he held her from behind, his chin resting on top of her damp hair. Suddenly, he spoke in a low voice. "I did not mean to torment you." She was half asleep, too tired to reply. "It's just," he tightened his arms around her, his voice laced with an almost helpless sigh and a dark, overwhelming desire. "I cannot control myself. You suit me too perfectly." This almost straightforward confession, paired with his relentless, day and night demands, revealed a clumsy yet fiercely passionate devotion. Yun Fu's heart skipped a beat, her cheeks flushing. She buried her face in the water, not daring to look at him. On the third day, the traditional day for newlyweds to return to the bride's family home, Yi Chen did not wear his mask. When he appeared at Prime Minister Yun's mansion with his true face revealed, the shock it caused was far beyond anyone's imagination. Those who had come to gloat or pity Yun Fu were all stunned into silence by his breathtakingly handsome features and the cold, imposing aura surrounding him. Standing side by side, he tall and stern, she delicate and stunning. They looked like a perfect match made in heaven. By contrast, Rong Zhon, standing nearby, looking lost and dejected, faded into the background, utterly overshadowed. Though Yun Fu had deliberately chosen a high-collared dress, when she turned her head slightly, the ambiguous red marks on her neck were faintly visible. The lazy, soft glow of recent intimacy that naturally lingered in her eyes was like 1,000 tiny needles, piercing Rong Zhon's heart with unbearable pain. His fingers tightened around his wine cup until his knuckles turned white. Agony surged within him, his heart torn apart by regret and jealousy. A wild urge to destroy everything burning in his chest. During the feast, Yi Chen's actions were natural yet possessive in the extreme. He picked every bone from the fish before putting it in her bowl, tested the temperature of her soup before letting her drink it, and even casually wiped a smudge of oil from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. Most of his gaze stayed on Yun Fu. Occasionally, he would flick a glance at Rong Zhon, cold as a blade, a silent warning. Finally, Rong Zhon could bear it no longer. He stood up to propose a toast, his voice thick with bitterness. "General, you are truly attentive to Afu." Yi Chen lifted his cup, his eyes calm and unwavering, his reply cool and indifferent. "My wife is delicate, she deserves nothing less than my devoted care." He enunciated the words "my wife" clearly and deliberately, with unmistakable emphasis. Liu Yi had somehow sneaked into the feast. Seeing this, she spoke up in her deliberately soft, sweet voice. "Trying to stir up trouble, Sister Yun Fu, you look radiant. It seems the general's mansion really suits you. But I remember you used to dislike spicy food so much. The dishes today seem rather heavily seasoned, don't you think?" Every word was a veiled suggestion that Yun Fu was forcing herself to change to please Yi Chen. Before Yun Fu could reply, Yi Chen set down his cup, his tone still calm. "People's tastes change. My wife enjoys spicy food now. I've already replaced the kitchen staff twice to accommodate her preference." He had not only noticed this tiny change in her likes but also made the necessary arrangements long ago. A faint warmth stirred in Yun Fu's heart. She spoke up, her voice calm but her meaning clear. "You're right, Miss Liu, people do change. What we disliked in the past may be exactly what suits us now." As she spoke, her gaze drifted casually over Rongzhon and Liu Yi. Rongzhon winced at her words. Emboldened by the wine, he stood up abruptly, reaching out to pull Yun Fu aside, wanting to speak to her alone. Yi Chen stepped forward in an instant, blocking his path, his tall frame like an unyielding mountain, his eyes turning icy cold in a heartbeat. "Young Marquis, know your place, Yi Chen." Rongzhon lost control completely, roaring with rage. "You are nothing but a brute warrior. You are not worthy of Afu. You know nothing of the bond between us, Rongzhon." Yun Fu stood up sharply, her voice cold and sharp, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Not worthy. My husband is a first-rank general, a hero who has won countless battles to defend our country, upright and noble, a man among men. He treats me with sincerity, protects me from harm, respects me, and honors me. Tell me what makes him unworthy. Is it that he has betrayed me, abandoned his wife for a concubine, thrown me into danger time and time again, discarding me like a worthless rag? As you have done." It was the first time Yun Fu had defended Yi Chen so fiercely in public. Every word was like a sharp blade, tearing away Rongzhon's pretense and smashing his regret-filled heart into 1,000 pieces. Yi Chen glanced sideways at his little wife, who stood beside him like an indignant little beast defending its territory. A faint, almost imperceptible flicker of emotion crossed his eyes. Stunned by her scathing words, Rongzhon stumbled backward, his face drained of all color. Agony etched into every feature. He had never imagined that one day, she would stand up for another man like this. Yi Chen spared Rongzhon's shattered figure no further glance. He wrapped an arm around Yun Fu's shoulders, turning to Prime Minister Yun, whose expression was complex. "Father-in-law, my wife is feeling unwell. We shall take our leave first." With that, he led Yun Fu away directly, ignoring the stunned silence and chaos left behind in the hall. Rejected and humiliated beyond repair, Rongzhon's obsession only grew more extreme. He sent endless streams of expensive, rare gifts to the general's mansion, desperate to make amends, but Yun Fu returned every single one, untouched. Slowly but surely, her heart was being claimed by this man, hard and cold on the outside, yet true to his every word and action. Yi Chen was not just a man of insatiable desire. He noticed that Yun Fu would often stare thoughtfully at his discarded weapon designs in the study, even picking up a brush to jot down notes in the margins. When he asked her about it, he discovered she had insights far beyond those of ordinary noble ladies, a remarkable talent for machinery and mechanics. Instead of mocking her, he listened carefully, discussing the designs with her, even bringing out his private collection of military books and maps for her to study. When Yun Fu caught a mild cold, Yi Chen did not say much, but he ordered the kitchen to prepare light, nourishing medicinal kanji. At night, she would vaguely sense someone quietly checking if she had kicked off her covers, tucking them gently back around her. Once, a servant in the general's mansion, influenced by the outside rumors, had shown slight disrespect to the new mistress. When Yi Chen found out, he punished the servant publicly according to military law, establishing his authority in the mansion and making it crystal clear that Yun Fu's position as his wife was unshakable. When he was handling military affairs, he allowed Yun Fu to sit beside him, reading or drawing designs. They did not disturb each other. yet a quiet, harmonious sense of companionship filled the room, and when night fell, Yi Chen's possessiveness knew no bounds. His stamina was extraordinary, his desire endless. As if he could never be sated, each time reducing Yun Fu to a whimpering, pleading mess. Yet afterward, he would massage her sore waist with infinite gentleness, feed her nourishing tonics, and hold her tightly in his arms until she fell asleep. It was this stark contrast, the icy general who melted into a tender lover, that made him utterly irresistible. Would you like me to help you expand the final scene into a short epilogue that hints at their future together, with a touch of sweet domesticity? From her initial fear and discomfort to her gradual surrender and even her clumsy attempts to reciprocate, Yun Fu's body and heart were slowly but surely conquered by this complex, formidable man. On one occasion, Rongzhon sent yet another ambiguous letter, prompting Yi Chen to mistakenly suspect that Yun Fu still harbored feelings for him. That night, his movements were unusually forceful. He pressed her relentlessly between the sheets. His voice laced with icy unease and terrifying possessiveness as he demanded answers. Tears of grievance streamed down Yun Fu's face. Only then did Yi Chen snap out of his jealous rage. He halted his advances instantly, gathering her into a tight embrace. His voice hoarse with apology, revealing a rare vulnerability and remorse. This glimpse of his complicated inner self, hidden beneath his cold exterior, unexpectedly brought them closer than ever before. Rongzhon drowned his sorrows in alcohol at his mansion. While sorting through old belongings, he uncovered a trove of mementos from his time with Yun Fu, the intricately embroidered sachet she had sewn by hand, the paintings they had created together, the first birthday gift she had ever given him. Each item felt like a cruel mockery of his present loss. His agony doubled. Drunk out of his mind, he stumbled to the gates of the general's mansion, shouting Yun Fu's name recklessly. Playing the melody that had once been their song on a flute, he even sliced his arm with a dagger, demanding to see her as blood gushed forth, his actions growing more extreme and deranged by the minute. Yet all this did was fill Yun Fu with weariness and annoyance and spur Yi Chen to take even more ruthless action. He directly submitted a memorial to the emperor, impeaching the Marquis of Northern Pacification for failing to discipline his son, who had assaulted an imperial official's residence and caused a public disturbance. The entire Marquis's mansion was thrown into crisis under the immense pressure. The most devastating blow to Rongzhon came when he was lurking outside the general's mansion one day. He watched in horror as Yi Chen returned on horseback, with Yun Fu sitting astride the horse in front of him. Instead of letting her dismount on her own, Yi Chen lifted her bridle style and carried her steadily into the mansion gates. Yun Fu looped her arms around his neck naturally, burying her face in the crook of his broad shoulder, her posture radiating complete trust and affection. The visual impact of that moment, and the searing pain that tore through his chest, surpassed anything he had ever endured. Beneath the recent calm of the capital, undercurrents swirled. Though Yi Chen had suppressed the malicious gossip about Lady Yi with an iron fist, the source of the slander remained at large, a ticking time bomb. Yi Chen never let his guard down. His hidden guards, silent as shadows, had been closely monitoring Liu Yi's every move. Driven to the brink of madness by Rongzhon's growing estrangement and Yi Chen's relentless suppression, Liu Yi seethed with resentment. She refused to accept losing everything she had clung to and burned with jealousy at the sight of Yun Fu thriving under the ghost-faced general's protection. A vile, ruthless plan began to take shape in her twisted mind. She would destroy Yun Fu completely, ruining her reputation and ensuring she met a humiliating, unmarked end. She sold off all her valuable jewelry, even liquidating portions of the farmland Rongzhon had once given her. Through clandestine channels, she contacted a band of ruthless outlaws lurking on the outskirts of the capital. Her demands were unspeakably cruel. Not only were they to kidnap Yun Fu, but they were to subject her to unspeakable humiliation before staging an accidental death. Liu Yi believed her scheme was foolproof. She never suspected that every order she gave, every secret meeting she held, was being meticulously documented by the hidden guards and reported directly to Yi Chen. Inside the study, candlelight flickered, as Yi Chen read the gruesome details in the secret report. A bone-chilling cold emanated from his body, threatening to freeze the very air around him. His knuckles whitened with the force of his grip, but deep within his eyes blazed a calm, terrifying fury. "Your Highness," the leader of the hidden guards whispered, waiting for his command, "shall we apprehend her at once?" Yi Chen fell silent for a moment, his voice cold as ice. "No, let her proceed. Keep every single person involved under strict surveillance. We need irrefutable evidence. The moment she makes her move, we close the net." He did not want to merely stop her, he wanted an absolute, undeniable end. He would crush Liu Yi and all her vile schemes, along with every last and who dared to touch what was his. And he would make certain people witness exactly what kind of monster he had been protecting and what he had placed his trust in. 3 days later, Yun Fu set off for Hugua Temple on the outskirts of the capital, as planned, to pray for blessings. As the carriage traveled along a secluded mountain path, disaster struck without warning. Several masked black figures, moving like ghosts, pounced from the forests on either side, their attacks brutal and precise, targeting the carriage directly. The coachman and accompanying guards fought valiantly, but the outlaws were clearly well prepared, their martial arts skills vicious and unconventional. It was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. Just as the bandits closed in on the carriage with leering grins, preparing to drag Yun Fu out by force, swish, 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 a flurry of sharp, piercing sounds suddenly rang out. Poison-tipped crossbow bolts rained down like a deadly storm, striking the bandits' wrists and legs with unerring accuracy. Screams of agony echoed through the forest instantly. In the blink of an eye, more elite soldiers clad in black armor emerged from all directions, descending like divine warriors. They overpowered the outlaws in an instant, dislocating their jaws to prevent them from committing suicide. Yi Chen rode forth on his jet-black steed, emerging slowly from the woods. He wore the black iron mask once more. Under the sunlight, the mask glinted with an eerie, cold sheen, its ferocious fangs seeming to snarl, ready to tear their prey apart. He paid no heed to the writhing bandits on the ground, his gaze locking directly onto the carriage. "Did you frighten yourself, my lady?" His voice, filtered through the mask, was steady and calm, yet carried a reassuring strength that soothed her frayed nerves. The carriage curtain was drawn aside by a pair of strong, well-defined hands. Though Yun Fu's face was pale, her eyes remained remarkably composed. She looked up at Yi Chen and shook her head gently. "I'm fine." This entire ordeal had been under his control from the very start. He had informed her of the plan beforehand, ensuring she would not be truly harmed or terrified. Moments later, the hidden guards dragged a woman forward, her face ashen with terror, caught trying to flee in the chaos. It was Liu Yi. She had hidden herself nearby, waiting to gloat over Yun Fu's misfortune only to walk straight into a meticulously laid trap. The evidence was overwhelming. Liu Yi's secret correspondence with the bandits, records of their monetary transactions, and the confessions of the captured outlaws were all submitted to the Court of Judicial Review. Yi Chen did not appear in court personally, but the Chief Justice felt the weight of his presence like a mountain pressing down on his shoulders. The case involved the Marquis's mansion, the General's mansion, and even the Prime Minister's residence, not to mention the imperial betrothed Lady Yi. No one dared to treat it with anything less than the utmost gravity. One by one, the ironclad pieces of evidence were presented. Not only did they expose the heinous plot to kidnap, humiliate, and murder an imperial official's wife, but they also uncovered Liu Yi's role in spreading malicious rumors to ruin Yun Fu's reputation, deliberately smashing the beehive at the birthday banquet, and even witness testimonies that hinted at her involvement in leaking information to the bandits who had abducted Yun Fu earlier. All the long-buried schemes and calculated betrayals were finally torn from the shadows, laid bare in the harsh light of day for all to see. Rong Zhon was also summoned to testify in court. He had clung to the last shred of hope, refusing to believe the truth until he heard the sickeningly detailed evidence and watched Liu Yi's ugly transformation from desperate denial to raving madness in the face of irrefutable proof. The color drained from his face completely, his body trembling uncontrollably as a bone-deep cold washed over him, as if he had fallen into an icy abyss. So this was the truth. All those times he had argued with Yun Fu, pushing her away for the sake of this woman, all those times he had believed her tears and her feigned innocence, only to be rewarded with such unspeakable treachery. The woman he had cherished like a precious jewel was nothing more than a venomous snake, waiting to strike. And the treasure he had truly hurt, the one he had once sworn to protect with his life, he had lost her forever. A metallic taste flooded Rong Zhon's throat. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, his vision fading to black as he collapsed backward, unconscious. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. Convicted on multiple counts, Liu Yi was sentenced to exile 3,000 miles away, with no possibility of amnesty, doomed to never return to the capital for the rest of her life. When the verdict was announced, she snapped completely. She broke into hysterical laughter in the courtroom, screaming curses at Rong Zhon for his incompetence, at Yun Fu for her supposed ill fate, at everyone present. Reduced to a raving madwoman, she was dragged away roughly by the Yamen guards, her shrill cries echoing long after she was gone. When Rong Zhon finally regained consciousness, his face was ashen, his eyes hollow and empty, as if his very soul had been torn from his body. He struggled to his feet, ignoring the stares of the onlookers, and stumbled out of the Court of Judicial Review, a broken man. Chapter 19. A few days later. Whispers spread throughout the capital that the Marquis of Northern Pacification's mansion had begun selling off portions of its property. At the same time, several farm estates on the outskirts of the capital and a large sum of money were quietly transferred into Yun Fu's name. The old steward of the Marquis's mansion personally delivered the land deeds and banknotes to the general's mansion, tears streaming down his weathered face as he spoke a single sentence. The young Marquis bids me convey his deepest apologies. Rong Zhon's memorial to the emperor, requesting to be stationed in the bitter cold of the northern border, also arrived at the imperial palace. His words were sincere, his only wish to be far from the capital, never to return. The day he left, the sky was overcast and grey. Clad in plain white robes, Rong Zhon rode out of the city alone, never once looking back, only when he passed the long street leading to the general's mansion, still a distance away. Did he pause for a moment? His gaze lingered on the imposing mansion gates, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. In the end, his lips moved, and a faint, almost inaudible sigh escaped him. Carried away by the wind, he left a letter at the mansion gates, the envelope blank. Inside was a single sheet of plain paper, bearing 3 words, "I'm sorry." Rong Zhon's departure swept away the last traces of turmoil from the capital. Life in the general's mansion returned to perfect tranquility, so tranquil, it bordered on idyllic. Yi Chen remained as busy as ever, but he always made sure to return to the mansion in time for meals. Sometimes, Yun Fu would find herself staring blankly at a crabapple tree in full bloom outside the window, lost in thought, completely unaware of her surroundings. "Are you thinking of him?" Yi Chen's voice suddenly sounded from behind her, his tone neutral, giving no hint of his emotions. Yun Fu snapped out of her reverie, shaking her head gently. "No, just daydreaming." She spoke the truth. To her, Rong Zhon was nothing more than a distant, faded memory, a dream from a past life. Yi Chen did not press further, but that night, between the sheets, his demands were more intense than usual, infused with an unshakable possessiveness and a hint of barely concealed unease. Yun Fu was left weak and trembling, her eyes glistening with tears. Through her blurred vision, she could only make out the tight line of his jaw beneath the mask, and those unfathomable eyes, as if they were trying to swallow her whole. A few days later, Yi Chen was granted a rare day of rest. He took the opportunity to accompany Yun Fu on a trip to their villa outside the city. Halfway there, more than a dozen cold arrows suddenly shot out from the dense forests on either side of the road. Their target, the carriage, unmistakable. "Look out!" Yi Chen reacted with lightning speed, throwing himself over Yun Fu and pinning her to the soft cushions inside the carriage, shielding her with his own back. Thud! An arrow pierced through the carriage wall, embedding itself deeply in his shoulder. "General!" Yun Fu cried out in alarm, her fingers coming away sticky and warm blood. "Would you like me to help you craft a tense, emotional continuation of this scene?" focusing on Yun Fu's panic and Yi Chen's unwavering protection of her. Outside the carriage, the guards had already engaged the assassins in fierce combat. As if oblivious to the searing pain, Yi Chen quickly checked Yun Fu for injuries, his voice hoarse with an unprecedented mix of panic and fury. "I'm fine, your wound." Yun Fu stared at his robe, which was rapidly stained crimson with blood. Her voice trembling uncontrollably. The assassins were soon eliminated, with a few left alive for interrogation. Inside the villa, the military physician tended to Yi Chen's wound with nervous haste. The arrow had pierced deep into his flesh. When it was pulled out, cold sweat beaded on Yi Chen's forehead. Yet he did not utter a single sound of pain. Yun Fu watched from the side, her face ashen, her fingers twisting a handkerchief so tightly her knuckles whitened. Once the physician withdrew, they were left alone in the room. Yi Chen leaned back against the couch, watching Yun Fu bustle about, fetching water and wringing out a cloth. Suddenly, he reached out and caught her wrist. "Stop fussing, sit." His voice was low and hoarse, weakened by blood loss and pain. Yun Fu looked up, her gaze colliding with his deep, unfathomable eyes that seemed to churn with emotions she could not fully decipher. "It's just a minor injury. I won't die," he said, his eyes softening as they fell on her reddened lash line. "Don't cry." His words only served to break the dam. The tears Yun Fu had been holding back spilled forth instantly, landing on the back of his hand where he held hers, warm and scalding. Yi Chen's hand twitched violently, his grip tightening. The rough calluses on his fingertips brushed gently against her skin, sending a strange, tingling sensation coursing through her. "I'm really fine," he said again, his tone taking on a rare, clumsy note of tenderness and comfort. The atmosphere shifted subtly, something unspoken flowed between them, weaving through the lingering scent of blood and the quiet stillness of the room. Shortly after his recovery, Yun Fu was sorting through some old belongings when she came across a plain wooden box. Inside were a few trinkets Rong Zhon had given her long ago, a faded peace talisman, a dried-up writing brush, and the engagement jade pendant she had carefully glued back together after smashing it. She had planned to dispose of everything that day. Yi Chen walked in just as she was holding the pendant, staring at it, lost in thought. His footsteps faltered, his eyes turned icy cold in an instant, the air around him growing heavy with suppressed anger. He strode over, took the pendant from her hand, and examined it, his tone giving away nothing of his feelings. "Shoddy craftsmanship, ugly repair job." With that, he tossed it casually into the nearby wastebasket, the movement clean and decisive. Yun Fu opened her mouth to speak, but in the end, she said nothing. She looked at the tense line of his profile and suddenly, she understood. Chapter 20. That night, he was unusually quiet. He pulled her into his arms, his movements forceful and unyielding, branding his mark on her body over and over again, as if trying to confirm her existence this way, to drive away the shadows he did not want to see. Yun Fu endured his almost punitive demands, her mind growing hazy with passion. Clinging to his shoulders, she whimpered softly, tears in her voice, and called him a single word: husband. The man above her froze abruptly. All the fierce, turbulent emotion in him seemed to melt away at that one soft call. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and kissed her deeply. His movements remained powerful, but they were now infused with an indescribable tenderness and a sense of final confirmation. Occasionally, news filtered back from the northern border. The young Marquis Rong had become a completely different man in that bitter, cold land. He was taciturn, devoting himself entirely to training his troops and defending the frontier, earning countless military merits. Yet he refused all rewards and promotions, never once returning to the capital. When Yun Fu heard the news, she was sitting by the window, sketching a floral pattern. Her brush paused for a split second, then resumed its steady strokes, as if she had merely heard a piece of trivial gossip about a stranger. She had truly let go. Yi Chen sat nearby, reading a book, but his eyes never left her for a moment. Seeing her reaction, his grip on his teacup relaxed almost imperceptibly, the last trace of shadow fading from his eyes. That night, the moonlight was like water, spilling over the courtyard. Yi Chen dismissed all his attendants. then took Yunfu's hand and led her to the crabapple tree in the center of the yard. The moonlight outlined his tall, straight figure and his sharp, angular features, softening the perpetual coldness that surrounded him. He raised his hand, slowly removing the black iron mask he wore day and night, beneath the moon. His face was breathtakingly handsome, enough to take one's breath away. "Yunfu," he said. His voice deep and solemn, carrying a sincerity she had never heard before. "I love you, not you are my wife," but the most direct, honest confession of love, with his true face revealed, and his true heart laid bare. Yunfu's heart skipped a beat. She looked up into his eyes. Gone was the usual unfathomable coldness or calculating scrutiny. Instead, her reflection was clearly mirrored in his gaze, filled with undisguised affection and devotion. Her cheeks flushed, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She met his eyes, nodding gently, her voice soft but clear. "I love you too." No more words were needed, everything was understood in that single moment. He reached out, pulling her gently into his arms. This time, it was not a possessive, imprisoning embrace, but one filled with cherished tenderness and quiet promise. They stood there, holding each other silently beneath the moon, their heartbeats slowly synchronizing into one. From this moment on, they were no longer merely husband and wife in name, they had become partners, their souls and hearts irrevocably bound together. The following spring, the imperial physician confirmed the news. Yunfu was with child. When the message reached him, the usually composed and stern General Yi froze in place for several heartbeats. Then, overwhelming joy surged through him. He swept Yunfu up into his arms, spinning her around several times, drawing startled cries of "Careful, General," from the surrounding nurses and maids. He set her down gently, overcome with nervous excitement, wanting to touch her, yet afraid to do so. On his incomparably handsome face was an undisguised, almost foolish grin of delight, his eyes shining brighter than the stars. He placed his hand carefully on her still flat abdomen, his voice trembling with emotion. "Really, here, there's our child." Watching this rare, silly side of him, Yunfu could not help but smile. Her eyes and brows softening with a warm, happy glow, she nodded gently. Yes, from that day onward, Yi Chen guarded Yunfu even more fiercely than his own eyes. But Yunfu did not spend her days idly resting. With Yi Chen's full support, she refined some of her ingenious designs, improved farm tools, small water conservancy mechanisms, and submitted them to the Ministry of Works through her father's connections. To her delight, her inventions were adopted and promoted nationwide, benefiting countless common people. Overnight, the reputation of the general's wife, virtuous, intelligent, and dedicated to the welfare of the people, spread throughout the capital. The ugly rumors of the past were long forgotten. After 10 months of pregnancy, the time finally came. Yunfu gave birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, with their children playing around their knees. The days passed in peaceful contentment. Yi Chen remained the fearsome ghost-faced general of Great Ju, a name that struck terror into the hearts of enemies far and wide. But when he returned home, removing his black armor and mask, he was just a handsome, gentle husband and father, one who would let his children tug at his beard, and who always gravitated toward his wife. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he held his daughter in his arms, watching Yunfu patiently teach their son to read. Golden sunlight bathed the courtyard, warm and serene. He walked over, wrapping his arms around Yunfu from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Tired?" he whispered. Yunfu shook her head, leaning back against his warm, solid chest, watching their 2 children laughing and playing. A contented, happy smile curved her lips. All the hardships of the past had become nothing more than a prologue. The future would be filled with quiet, warm days, days that belonged only to their little family. "Would you like me to help you write a short, sweet bonus scene about the twins' first birthday, showing the family's warm domestic life?"